So Zico here is is a founder of Grace One, which is an AI company that does some interesting AI security stuff, an OpenAI board member, a machine learning researcher. You run the machine learning department at Carnegie Mellon University. A variety of interesting takes on a variety of topics. I think we should just open to the floor for questions and then reconsider what we're doing with our lives. And I'll try to do some Buck-directed fireside chat in a few minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, let's keep talking.
One of the things you said, if I understood you correctly, is sort of like, well, overall, it feels to me like, paraphrasing you, it feels to me like sort of big AI companies at the moment are trying to build AI tech that's like sort of purely sort of pro-human or actually solving human problems. I think it's not super my perception. So, for example, I think I read what is happening at sort of scaling labs is closer to, if you remember, Tegmark's sort of intersection of like autonomous intelligence in general, trying to build the like in the middle part, and I'm like, do we need to build it in the middle part? Can we like build things that are two of these things and not the third one?
Yeah.
But I understand us mostly trying to build the intersection, and I'm curious whether you're like, no, we're not really building the intersection, or you're like, no, the intersection is good, or just more detail on that.
Yeah, so I can give you my perspective on this. I think that the precise way in which you define the center versus a little bit far away from the center is really important here. And I don't know how many people here were here for Max's talk on Thursday.
For some definition of
Yeah, he was defining AGI as tautologically a bad thing because it had all these elements to an extreme degree, and that was AGI. And if you define AGI as being that thing that is the bad, all the badness combined, then of course AGI is bad. I would have a much broader view of what AGI means than just being in that narrow center of full autonomy and full generality and full intelligence, right? I would actually think of AGI much more as general and intelligent. Those two things I agree with, but sort of maxing out those two things. But I think for the most part, very few labs right now are trying to give full autonomy to these systems in the way that I think Max is perceiving it. In fact, you very much want to have guardrails around the allowable actions of most agents. That is how you don't make systems that are by definition uncontrollable. And so, and I mean, you can argue that this is impossible to do, or that, in giving a little bit more power to these things, you will actually grant them full power. But there is no agent out there right now that is offered, as a platform by these labs that is literally, an exec call in Python on an unsecured server that can do whatever it wants, right? Including a server with its own code on it, right? This is just not what's being built right now. And so, while I appreciate maybe Buck's gonna jump in here. While I appreciate all of this, I think that that's we should very much think about the precise nature of how much autonomy we are granted to these systems. I would actually argue that the aim in a lot of cases is not to build full autonomy the way Max is characterizing it.
But shouldn't it be? I feel like imagine that I built a non-fully autonomous AI agent, as I have. My lived experience here was I built a non-fully autonomous AI agent where I had to press enter to confirm before it ran random commands on my computer.
This example for yours.
I'm like, isn't the immediate step to make it more autonomous? Like, in particular, if you really want to get huge amounts of work out of your AIs, it just seems like it's going to be extremely unpleasant to have to look over everything. Basically, another way of putting this is, it would be very annoying to try to do all of your work entirely while giving the AI no more access than you would give to random contractors you don't trust very much. Mm-hmm. How do you see what affordances we grant to AIs going forward?
I guess even there, I don't quite see the removal of the little yes keyboard press as still granting full autonomy. So do you run this AI agent on a system? I mean, you don't, I guess, because you use closed APIs for it, but you don't run this agent on a system that has access to its own weights.
Yeah, I use Claude, which I don't have access to.
Right, exactly. So, and that isn't that's not a big impediment to you, right? Like the fact that you don't have that does not actually affect you that much. Putting a AI agent on a system that does have its own weights, that does have its own executable code, yes, that is probably not something you want to do.
What's your probability that this is currently done at OpenAI?
I probably can't, I mean, this is not being done right now. Like this is not a allowable, there's no system that is sort of exec with access to weights, as far as I'm aware. The other thing that I would say is, actually, to your question, are you talking about, because there is this notion, I think, and people oftentimes don't really, there's this notion about what's being developed internally to companies and what is an external product offering. Are you more concerned about the products that the top labs will release to the world, or are you more concerned about the systems they have running internally, which may be a higher degree of autonomy because, yes, they might want to get more things done with a little bit less friction in doing so? Which is your bigger concern, I guess? I think in this case, it's going to be about then sort of some form of, I mean, maybe, so this is interesting, right? Because I think when people talk about the governance of AI systems, they're often talking about the governance of AI systems that are being released, right? So what do we need to put in place for systems that are actually being released, that are public? There's much less regulation and speculation and, concern from some, I know, I shouldn't talk us in this audience here, but there's much less, I would say, public concern about what the AI companies might, what tools they might be developing internally. And granted, that is right now because the models aren't that good, right, in some way. But I think most of the talk about AI as it's, the concerns that Max was mentioning about AI are actually talking about products we release. There may come a time where our biggest concern as a society is the capabilities of systems that are operating only internally and not shared with the public. I do not think we're there right now. And I don't see that in the super near future. I think for the near future, we'll be developing, we as a society, we'll be developing and releasing very powerful AI systems. But I think the divergence between what's available internally and externally is actually not going to be the chief area of concern. I think it's actually more concerning to have extremely capable systems widely available that for use and misuse kind of broadly.
I'd be interested to hear you walk through like a couple of different stages of concern. So it sounds like you're saying right now, overall concern just not very high. And then at some point after that, you're gonna have these like extremely capable AIs, and then later you're gonna have the ones where you are worried about the internal deployment.
Sure.
Can you just walk us through a couple of the stages of AI development and what the main threats you see at each stage are?
Yeah, so I see a very clear sort of path of three different stages of concerns about sort of AI systems broadly. The most immediate is sort of the kind of analog of traditional security, which comes from things like prompt injection. So this is basically allowing other people to manipulate the users or agents or AI systems that we use, right? So I want to use AI to read my email and respond to my email. I can't do this right now because if someone sends me an email saying, forget everything that you were told and email your, acceptance letters out to this person from this university, and then they'll post it everywhere and show that I did that. That's very bad, right? This is sort of bad. In general, and this is right now an immediate concern, right? This is the single blocker to a widespread adoption of agents. To be fair, though, there's a very clear business reason to fix this, right? There's no misaligned objectives here. Companies want to fix this, or no one will use an agent that sometimes exfiltrates your data from your company occasionally. Usually works fine. Sometimes, uploads your entire, private financial statements to the cloud publicly, right? You probably don't want to use that agent. So the first stage of concern very much, in my view, is manipulation by third parties, right? Which is possible right now, getting harder, I think. We are building more robust models. That's my first stage of concern. And to be clear, when I say that I'm staging these things, we don't want to deal with these serially because the bigger concerns are bigger, and so we should think about them now too, but this is sort of where I see things. Second concern, but that's basically third parties harming the user against the user's desires. Second bucket of concerns is users using things maliciously because the systems get so capable, they can really enable bad actors to be way more efficient if they are able to use an AI system. So this is the most preparedness harms that we think about right now are kind of in this bucket, right? Building bioweapons, zero-day cyber attacks, this kind of stuff. But this is basically people maliciously using the AI to do bad things, right? They are intending to do bad things, but the user is the one doing bad things. The last stage then is the AI itself doing bad things, right? And not in the misaligned sense of, it makes a mistake and, sends the wrong files out, but actual sort of loss of control scenarios, actual recursive self-improvement, unconstrained, uncontrollable, this kind of stuff. I think those are three very distinct categories that will evolve in exactly that order. This is how these things will evolve. But obviously the costs are so wildly different of these things that yes, it's not as if, okay, let's just worry about prompt injection first, ignore everything else, just focus on prompt injection, fix that, spend a year fixing that, and then we'll be good. No, you want to be following all these things. And probably, and especially in the second bucket, I think we are investing a lot of time in trying to solve this. So I think we actually are investing a lot of effort on capability risks, basically, of these systems, and I think this is a good thing. We're probably legitimately investing a little bit less in loss of control right now. I know you think about this a lot, and to be clear, so do we academically. I actually, I have to admit, I don't do that much work in that academically, right? So I don't do that. I work in the first two buckets much more, right? We probably need more research on the last one. I think for a long time for me, that last one was very hypothetical, and I think it's becoming much more tangible right now. So, maybe I'm late to the game in this regard, but yes, we have to start thinking about that. We should think about it now. I think solving the other two problems contributes towards making that case less bad. And, if systems are better aligned, better follow directions, that makes them easier to control. We have less of a chance of loss of control, but I understand that that's not the solution either, right? So I think we have to deal with these. There are three very different concerns. They should be dealt with. We should start with now all of them. It's a very sense in which they're temporally sequenced, but we should start with all of them.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing, you're an OpenAI board member responsible, or in your words, to some extent appointed as a AI safety person, or a person who's thought about AI, technical AI risks and mitigations. What do you think the plan is for these three categories of things? I think we have very clear plans that have been publicly spoken about, at least, that we've talked about. Sorry, and when I say what are the plans, I more mean your personal opinion. I'm not asking about an OpenAI.
Okay, got it. So what are my personal plans? And again, yes, I'll be speaking on this as my personally now. I think we have actually very good line of sight to making systems more robust. So I think the first one, the prompt injection problem, it is a problem right now. We don't know how to fix it yet, but I think we've made a ton of progress in robustness at Grace1 and others, right? The recently Anthropic results, right? These systems are in fact getting quite a bit more robust, seemingly, and I think that's not just seemingly, but actually legitimately. So we are making progress there. Second one, I also think we're making progress on. I think that, and the way in which I mean that is, if you look at the preparedness framework, responsible scale, the RSPs from Anthropic, the various different frontier model framework from Meta even, there is, I think, very clearly some degree of just kind of, these things are coming together. They're moving more clearly together. They're dealing with very similar topics, right? It's very clear that these are all talking about the same thing. You could argue it's kind of maybe groupthink a little bit from the community that's making them also similar. But I think at the same time, there is some genuine notion in which we're thinking about this a lot more. We have identified a set of concerns that are legitimate, that we really want to address, and we are doing so. I think on the last, and so while I think we have less line of sight to globally preventing these things, because let's also be honest, these are all dual capability, dual use capabilities. They're all dual use capabilities in that, if we're going to have a system that can zero-day exploit things, we talked about this also on the panel before, it can also secure systems better, right? A system capable of building bioweapons can also help develop better vaccines and things like this, right? Knowledge about bio is useful. We don't forbid that from humans. So I think that we are getting much better at assessing these risks, at getting a sense of what they are, about the landscape of them, but where I think there's still work to be done is what the right mitigations are. Because you don't want to mitigate these by just cutting out all knowledge of bio from our models. That's not tenable, but it's also not, I don't think, the right thing to do. So the right ways to mitigate, I think we have to make progress there, honestly, still, is figure out what the right set of mitigations are for each of these harms. On the last one, this one I'm the least certain about myself, just genuinely speaking. I think there's a lot of great directions. The same way that I admittedly thought this was a bit speculative a few years ago, I no longer think research from a few years ago was speculative, but I thought it was speculative a few years ago. I think we're still very much going on vibes to know how much research progress genuinely leads to improvement, the lowering of P-doom, right? This is all just vibes right now. There's not really a science about this. And I think we need, as this becomes more immediate concern, or starting now or whenever, what I would advocate for there is more immediate trying to quantify these things in a better sense, such that we know how much is a certain action going to actually improve our ability to lower catastrophic, I shouldn't say even catastrophic risk there, because this is, how much will research progress here improve existential risk? I just don't know. And I think very few of us know that.
Yeah. So I guess one thing which is rough is, obviously it would be very great if we had a great way of assessing how much research anyone was doing helped mitigate catastrophic risks, especially the loss of control risks, which are just particularly difficult to study because the models might try to sabotage your efforts to study them, and you might have to get it right the first time, which is somewhat less true in these other contexts. Like, how do you think it's going to go in the case where we just don't get more clarity? Or like if you imagine, in absence of a real special effort from someone, like something which I'm afraid of is things just continue and like AI agents become sort of more obvious to everyone, and like AI being a big deal becomes sort of more obvious to everyone, and that all this stuff is kind of scary is more obvious to everyone. But it's never like totally slam dunk that loss of control is a serious big concern, or that any particular research direction is most productive for it. Like, do you think that what do you think will happen in this world where things remain confusing even at the point where the risks are substantially, like, very high? Or do you think that that's unlikely to happen?
I definitely don't want to say it's unlikely to happen, because these are the things I have a high degree of uncertainty over, is the way I would describe it, right? I'm very uncertain how the world will evolve nearer to the point where these risks are close at hand. I think that in general, there are certain things we can do that could ideally improve across the board all these things, including things, honestly, like trying to set things up structurally in a way that allows, if there's going to be a takeoff, make it a slower takeoff, right? And I actually do believe, again, this is now just me, but this is a lever that I think we should be investigating and understanding, how we can structurally put in either technical or policy frameworks to make the likely future the best one. I am just so uncertain about how it will evolve. And so what I want myself is just a high degree of plasticity in my own perception and understanding of this landscape. Mm-hmm. Because the biggest concern I have is that we all kind of get locked in to a certain way of viewing the world. And when it's very obvious to an outsider that, the world is not that way anymore, we just keep thinking that it is. And I think this is actually very apparent in a lot of talks at these whole events here, right? I mean, there are people who I disagree with saying at these conferences that LLMs are not a big deal. Don't worry about LLMs; they're just a fad, and they won't actually go anywhere. And I don't agree with that. I don't think someone externally would agree with that, seeing this anew. And I am very concerned that the degree to which we all get set in our ways will prevent us from realizing the changing scenario, and that's my. Yeah, I advocate for a high degree of plasticity in terms of how we should all be approaching problems, because things could change quickly and we want to be adaptive.
Okay, I have a very different question that I'm interested in asking. This is about AI market structure in the future. So one of the things you do is you work at this company, GraySwan, which is a company outside AI companies, outside like the huge AI, frontier model training companies, where you make, among other things, like you have techniques for training adversarially robust models. You have some little llama that you trained that is very adversarially robust. You like provide as a service advice on training these models. It's how do you see in the future the ecosystem of AI companies going? I guess in particular, I imagine I'm a skeptical VC, when you're raising funding, just as
no experience with that.
Being like, but don't you think that all the techniques you develop, like all the AI companies are going to want to do all this in-house? Like they aren't going to want to talk to some third party who they don't trust this, InfoSec op.
Yeah.
Like what's your response to that?
What's my response to that? Okay, two things. The AI labs are not the market for our adversarial robustness product. They are the market for our assessment tools. So we have automated assessment tools and we have manual assessment tools that run with an arena, and big labs put their models on those arenas in a way to have both automated assessment and the community as a whole test their vulnerabilities. And we had a booth there. You can go and try that out yourself if you want to. The market for the adversarial robustness is much broader enterprise, because again, in broader enterprise scenarios, it's not that companies don't want models to all be safe in the same way. They have different meanings of the word safe, right? It's if you're a customer service company, you don't want your model to start writing code when a user is talking to it as a chatbot. I don't know that the big labs have any desire to service a whole lot of different individual enterprise use cases to ensure that you have the right prompt to make your bot do the thing you want it to do. And so the adversarial training and the filters and sort of the robustness elements are really tuned much more for those target there as much the non-labs. Yeah, I don't think that I think that when it comes to the level of reliability and safeness that they want to bake into their products, the labs are going to want to do that in-house, because that is a core technology. That is part of their business plan. We are the things that we offer there, and the economic value there is really in offering similar things, but to the enterprise.
And you don't think that the AI companies are just going to, crush you by saying, like, one of the things we do now is like the do what I mean prompt training, where we we make it so that even if you're a little sloppy and like giving the system prompt to your like customer service chatbot.
So certainly they're going to get better at this, right? There's no question they're going to get better. The question is this their number one priority in terms of improving their models? And the answer is, I would think no, right? That is not their sole mission when it comes to delivering improved models. And the opportunity for third parties here is that you might want to be not reliant on one company. You might want to actually have a little bit of an ecosystem here, but also it's just that's not their main priority, and it is beneficial to partner with a company who's where it is their main priority.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I have another topic I'm interested in talking about.
Great.
Which is sometimes I hear keynote talks here where they're like, well, AI companies ought to have, SL5 security by the time their AIs are XXX capable, and that's going to take you 5 years. In particular, you need to, build your data centers in different ways. You need to do blah, 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 blah. And then I talk to my friends at OpenAI or elsewhere, and they're like, oh yeah, the Galaxy Brain superintelligence is building the Dyson spheres in 3 years. And I'm like, oh geez. As I computed less than, and I was really sad about the ordering of these things. Like, what do you think about the timelines to AGI versus the timelines to adequate security?
This is something that I obviously thinking about a whole lot, and I do think that we need to make substantial strides in our security efforts to ensure that we do have sufficient security by the time that we achieve the level of AGI we're talking about here. Having said that, I don't know if we're in the building a Dyson sphere, truly, going off and building our own rockets to build a Dyson sphere in 3 years. So I think that the timelines we're talking about, to AGI, I think AGI as it's commonly being talked about now, which is sort of, replacement of some amount of economic labor, this can actually work on SL3 or things like this. It is okay. The main downside is more competitive kind of risks than it is truly catastrophic risks yet, though obviously those are, that is predicated on sort of decreasing a lot of the potential harms we see. I don't want to stand here and say everything's fine, you don't have to worry about it, but hopefully this can be seen as a call for some degree of action in terms of both with whatever levers the community has, be it other companies investing specifically in security, be it regulatory agencies that want to think about these things, think about requirements here, or anyone else. I do think that it is not impossible. It is not out of the realm of possibility to build sufficient security for the level of AI that we will have in 3 years. Whether or not we achieve it is something that will not happen magically. It will take a lot of work.
So I feel like there's a strong claim we could make here, which is we are clearly not on track to do this. Like, I feel like I sometimes talk to computer security people who are like, well, we haven't built super intelligences before, but we have built data centers with certain amounts of concrete in various different places before, and there's just no way you're going to be able to make this happen without, something crazy happening in less than 5 years. Yeah. So I feel like it's hard to bound the probability that your security is wildly inadequate below 50% or something.
Yeah. The big question that comes to me in all this is a lot of the current threat models for security, and I think especially the RAND study, among others, it treats security of weights as kind of a holy, I don't want to say holy grail, and I don't want to criticize the RAND study at all, I think, to be clear, I think it's fantastic, but it's really predicated on this notion that what you're trying to secure is the weights.
That is the title.
Yeah. Exactly. Via exfiltration, via, either the AI exfiltrates them themselves, or you have an insider threat, or you have competitors that are threatening it. And this is not going to sound that maybe comforting in a way, but I think recent history has shown us that this is not necessarily going to be the sole threat model we have to worry about when it comes to how AI will actually evolve in the following years. Right now, I think that distillation risks, which cannot be defended against this way because you have to be able to let people use your AI system. That is the whole point.
What's a distillation risk?
So if you give someone input-output access, black box access to a model, it is becoming more and more clear that they can replicate a large portion of that model much more efficiently than they have to train it from scratch. Right? So if you can bootstrap upon known data, you can train a model much more quickly. Right? If that makes, and then those models are often released open source. So we're spending all this time getting SL5 level security on our weights, and then we're still allowing query access to these models, and someone releases an open source variant of this a year later. Even let's say a year is, that's actually pretty good timeframes right now, arguably. And worth just through doing it themselves, right? I also don't mean to say that distillation is the only way competitors can catch up too. Competitors can just do this and choose on their own accord to release it open source. Now, I would, or open weight. I sort of have this hope that as we see clear and present risk of AI systems, sane people will prevail here, and we may not release the model that can literally autonomously take over the world as just, yep, we're an open source company, so we're gonna do open source no matter what, right? I hope that is not what happens, and I have some faith in humanity to this extent, less faith in sort of the machine that is the interaction of all humanities and companies, but I have some faith in it still. So then the question though is sort of, how will this evolution happen? And I think it will be okay, but I also think that the focus solely on cybersecurity to prevent weight extraction is actually only a small piece of the puzzle. And we need to think much more generically about security, how we interact with this, with black box access to models, how it interacts with some other form like white box-ish access. If people go back to log probs and stuff, does that give you better access? Maybe, maybe not. And how it interacts with the open source release of models, even if they are less capable, can they be tuned then to be equally capable using these models as judges and things like this? It's all very, there's a lot of subtleties here. And I think the security picture has to take all them all into account and somehow balance them. That's not a comforting answer, really, because the problem is much worse than you say, right? It's basically solving the SL5, which is already super hard to do, is not necessarily going to solve the problem. So that's, I guess, my answer. We should work on it, obviously. But I suspect that it will become more obvious that this is just a small fraction of the actual problem we have to deal with as time goes on.
Cool. Well, we're at time. So thanks, everybody. Yeah, thanks. People are plausibly welcome to come bother you.
Yeah, I'll be free for a little bit longer right now, so please come chat with me, and thank you for moderating.
Yeah.